Welcome. Hi, I'm Mikki, and this is Mikkipedia, where I sit down and chat to doctors, professors, athletes, practitioners, and experts in their fields related to health, nutrition, fitness, and well-being. And I'm delighted that you're here. Morning everyone, hope you've had a great week, and hey, I am super excited to bring to you today a bit of a long potty actually. We did it in two parts. I talked to Dr. Dan Plews and I canvassed his audience for some super interesting questions, and we take a deep dive into things related to continuous glucose monitors, to ketogenic diets, to HIIT-based training, exercise physiology, a whole host of things, but it's really based on sort of that not only performance and athlete, but also optimal health and well-being, which is sort of a space that both Dan and I are super interested in. And so we also have just a really good conversation around the things that we do. You know, we're basically having a conversation where at the end of it, I almost sort of wish on other times, man, I wish I recorded that. And today is that sort of conversation. So hopefully you enjoy it. And it is in two parts. Now, before we go any further, for those of you who are not aware, Dr. Dan Plews, he is many things. He is an applied exercise physiologist. He is the founder of Endure IQ, which is an online endurance coaching community and service. Dan is the Hawaii Ironman Triathlon age group world record holder, and he got around that course in 8:24, and that was set in 2018. And whilst doing it, he was a low carbohydrate athlete, and we do talk a little bit about what he did with that particular race. He's a coach himself. He's coached 3 professional Ironman triathletes to sub 8 hours, including Terenzo Bozzoni, Jan van Berkel, and Tim van Berkel. He's consulted with New Zealand Rowing, and earlier this year he was in the role of high performance manager for Team Emirates New Zealand in the America's Cup, which of course we went on to win. So, you know, he has a lot of strings to his bow. Now, we recorded the first part before lockdown, and then we lost actually the last part of our conversation, so we jumped back on in during lockdown and finished that conversation off. So what I've done for this episode, which is supported by Balance Sports Nutrition, is I've got a little interlude, and this is actually your opportunity to connect with me over this episode and win yourself some protein powder thanks to my friends at Balance Sports Nutrition, which is one of the protein powders which I absolutely love, but you'll hear more about that in the interlude. Now please enjoy this conversation with Dan Plews. Dr. Dan Plews.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Thanks for, this is the first time we've actually managed to get our ducks in a row and actually meet up in person.
I know, amazing.
Casa de la Plews, so.
Yeah, it's great. I had to almost buy a plane ticket to get here. It's so far out of Auckland. Beautiful view though, Dan. Yeah.
Well, apparently I was reading in the podcast the other day that having a large visual field is quite important for your parasympathetic activation, so.
That is true. Do you know, okay, so we must have been listening to the same one.
Yeah,
Huberman.
Tim Ferriss, yeah.
Yeah. So my question is, during winter time, right?
Yeah.
You get up in the morning. Typically for people like us, it will probably be dark.
And then you look at your phone.
No, I don't look at my phone. I'm very good.
Yeah.
I withhold that until later on. But that natural light, actually, you don't get natural light for at least a couple of hours.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking the exact same thing. But I mean, I guess because he was saying that the first thing you should do is go out and get some natural light, right? But it's impossible, especially if, for me, half the time I go to a swimming pool as well. There's no natural light in there either. Yeah. It's dark, so.
It sort of speaks to the time that he usually gets up. Lazy o'clock.
Yeah.
Like 7 or 8.
I included him in my my bi-weekly newsletter because I found his story fascinating. Yeah. Because he was such a from a background that you would never believe that he'd get tenure at Stanford from. It's amazing. It's a good story. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Brew Up, can anyone sign up for that?
Anyone can sign up for the Brew Up, yeah. So the Brew Up, oh man, we've got a plug straight away. It's only a few minutes in. The Brew Up is a bi-weekly newsletter where I just give 5 top tips of. It has a podcast, an article I've read, some new science, some new technology. It's quite popular as well. Actually, people like it. It's like more than 10,000 subscribers now.
Oh wow! So, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we look to build that up, and it's really good. So I think people get spammed by a lot of newsletters, but fortunately we've had often people will say it's the one newsletter I actually read, and don't just put straight into the junk. So
I love it, even the ones that don't mention me.
Yeah. But this week,
yes.
You're in there. You're mentioned.
I know. So I was stoked.
The cold thermogenesis blog. So
it's good. It's good for the geeks amongst us, which, let's be fair, but not only that.
Yeah. And I think like with anything, it's when you listen to a podcast, you read an article. And I even have this same thing with my students is that, I want someone to read an article, read a journal paper, read a blog and put it down and go, I can do something. I can try that. I can change that. And I think even with podcasts, what's people's favorite bits are like a book that listen to a good book or a morning routine that they can try. People like that kind of thing. And that's what we try and do in the Brew Up is that, it gives you something to read, something to listen to, a workout that you can try, and a bit of the latest science to keep you up to date. So that's kind of the way we roll with it.
Nice. And, back to Huberman though, very interesting character. I agree. Super intelligent. One thing is though, like I feel like he's expanded his repertoire to go beyond his professional expertise, which is not a problem, but I do remember him like a whole big podcast on fat loss. We're using exercise and fueling before and after and just some of the things. And I was like, I just don't know that you're right about that. Not that he has to be right 100% of the time. Yeah. But he's sort of like, he's got a media machine behind him now.
Yeah, exactly.
Which has then sort of said to him, okay, you've got to go onto these topics. And I think he said that in Tim Ferriss. You've got to go into these other things which people are super interested in as well. He does an amazing job 90% of the time.
But I think everyone gets guilty of that. Like, as soon as you're an expert in the area of nutrition or whatever, or you're a doctor in physiology or whatever, people think you know everything about everything. And the amount of questions people ask me about the COVID vaccine, and I'm like, I don't really know. Why are you asking me these questions? But people just assume, right?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting. It's easy to get sucked in, right?
Yeah. So. Although I'm loving his podcast and I'm super thrilled with it and that's the great thing about, I suppose, like you hear someone on Tim Ferriss and then you're like, oh, you've got like 18 other episodes of things which I'm super interested in that you can then use on your long run.
Yeah. But I mean, podcasts are podcasts. That's what people do now. People interview podcasters or interviewing the other people who have the podcast, and then so many people have podcasts now. It's like...
Yeah, I know. It's the thing to do, Dan. Yeah, well, you have yet to do it.
No, I'm trying to hold back a little bit, but I don't know if anytime soon I'll do one. But I get to go on podcasts like yours, so why do I need to? Then I don't have to do any of the editing either.
There you go. Yeah. All right. So what I wanted to do today, Dan, was sort of just have a conversation, basically, and then get questions from your audience, a few from my audience. We've got like 9 or 10 of them because a lot of people are like us. Like you sort of want to be a fly on the wall for general chit chat that, people like us might sit down and just discuss because we're geeks.
Yeah, we live it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to start right from the beginning, actually. This one's from Katie Boyd.
Oh.
You'll know Katie.
I do know Katie, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And she just really wanted to know...
She's going to throw me a curveball.
Not at all, actually. This is quite a nice scene setter.
Okay.
Was he an athlete in his younger years, and when did he start endurance exercise?
Oh, wow. So, Katie, I was an athlete in my younger years. I actually started training. I mean, I did my first swim run event when I was 9 years old.
Were your parents active?
Yeah, my dad was active. So my dad was a good cyclist.
Yeah.
He took up marathon running just because I think he had like me and my brother, and then you kind of think, hang on a minute, cycling is quite dangerous, and 2 is cycling takes up a lot of time. So he took up marathon running, and then obviously he went to triathlon. So my first memories were, my progression as an athlete. I used to cycle when my dad was training for his marathon when he was running, and then from there, eventually, I'll be too fast. I mean, I remember I used to only just be able to keep up with him because I was that young. But then, you progress, and then we go riding together, and then eventually I was faster than him. So yeah. I think I actually outsplit him on a bike. We did a triathlon, Sheffield triathlon, and I outsplit him. The bike split when I was 12.
Mate. And then it just...
And he was mortified. He beat me overall, but it happened quite early in the year. I mean, by the time I was 14, I was beating him.
Yeah. And so from there, then Dan, just sort of talk me through your progression through your teenage years.
Yeah. So then I got pretty into triathlon. Obviously, I was in the British team. I was on. Then we had I was on lottery. I had lottery funding for. It was then it was called the World Class Potential Team. So it was youngsters who might go to the Olympics, and you get a bit of funding. And I was national junior champion, national youth champion. Went to the European Junior Championships and 23s, but I just never really was quick enough at running, basically, because one of the things that really happened, it was my last year as a junior, and I actually took a year out of university. So I finished my A-levels, which is, I don't know how that...
It's Form 7.
Right, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I finished my A-levels, then I had a year where I thought, right, I'm just going to train for a year, because that was supposed to be my final year as a junior, and I wanted to try and get a medal at the World Junior Championships. And then it was Olympic distance. So, and I really trained hard and focused on that for a year. But in that year, the whole ITU completely changed everything. And they moved me from last year junior to first year under 23.
Oh.
And that kind of just unrailed that whole thing. And then after that, and that's just when I was at Loughborough. Then I did my Loughborough. I tried to, race at under 23. Yeah. I was at Loughborough University studying, but then you had people like Will Clark, and these are the people before the Brownlees who just suddenly came out and they were just beating us by miles. So that was kind of the end of that. And then I went into doing. Finished my degree and went into doing a master's. And I think that point there was the point where I kind of stopped training as much, or not focusing as much, and shifted my focus more to academics.
Okay. And so did your sporting career influence where you wanted to go with your career, or was that something you discovered later?
No, I mean, I've always had a very keen understanding, passion for understanding performance, I think. I remember when I was on holiday, we used to go with my family holiday. We used to go to a place called Club La Santa, which is like a big sporting. It's a holiday resort for sports fanatics, like freaks. Like Patrick Langer's always there, and Lucy Charles is always there. You always see them on there. So we had a timeshare there, and we'd go there every Christmas time, basically. And part of it, you could do like a Conconi test, which is basically it's a testing where it's an incremental test, and you get to see your heart rate, and you look at the heart rate deflection point. And I remember it just fascinating me, so interesting. And that's kind of what made me very interested in data and physiology and training. But I think that's what I did. I did a undergraduate. I did sports science at Loughborough, but I was there primarily because that's where the British team was placed.
Yeah, okay.
So can't say I was the best student, but once I finished my undergraduate, I still got a second class honours, and I got through with very little studying. And I remember this is how bad I was. I was with my girlfriend at the time. I said to her in the final year, I was like, "And how do you get a book out from the library exactly?" She looked at me, "How do you not know to get a book out?" I was like, "Yeah," but I managed to turn it around. So yeah.
So, Dan, how did you go from Loughborough? How did you end up in New Zealand? Sort of just walk us through that. And then I want to ask you a little bit about your transition or getting back into triathlon and everything.
Well, okay. So from Loughborough, I went to Leeds. At Leeds, I was in a Leeds University, and I had a scholarship there with the British Triathlon Federation as a coaching scholarship. So they paid for my master's, and I was the assistant coach at the Leeds. And at the time, Alistair Brownlee was a junior. So that year I was there, he won the juniors for the first time, the World Junior Championships for the first time. Johnny was there as well. But at that time, Alistair was maybe 17. So Johnny was like 14.
Wow.
So and that gap, at that time, Johnny just seemed so young because of, the gap between 17 and 14. And so I went from there. I finished my master's. From my master's, I went over to Singapore, doing a coaching role, purely coaching, not sports science, but it was coaching like expats.
Okay.
And then from there, I actually, at the same time I was in Singapore, I then got a job working for the Singapore Sports Institute, which then took, because I realized I was quite into the science and the physiology, which took me straight into more of the physiology side. When I was there, I met Paul Lawson, who's the nurse being on your podcast and was my PhD supervisor. He got a job over in New Zealand working for High Performance Sport New Zealand. So he brought me over doing a PhD scholarship. And so I came over to New Zealand, started my PhD scholarship, started working with Rowing New Zealand shortly after. Was there for the 2 Olympic cycles, so London and Rio. And and that's kind of, I'm still here and now working with Women's Kayak and doing my own business and whatnot. So
amazing.
Yeah.
So alongside that, of course, it wasn't just your coaching and your academics, but you got back into triathlon, is that right?
Well, I don't think I ever stopped, really. Okay. I always did it. I was still doing it. Even in Singapore, I was still racing and competing, and I was doing pretty well on the Asian circuit still. I never really stopped, but I think the biggest transition was moving to a longer distance. I was so much better. Yeah, because you were like a bit of a workhorse. Oh yeah, I don't know. It just suited me so much more. I mean, the main problem with me doing the Olympic distance, I could not run fast enough. I was not a fast enough runner. But as soon as I went from Olympic distance to Ironman distance, my running went from my weakness to my best. Yeah, amazing. Massive difference. And that just was so refreshing because I would get onto the run thinking, oh, great, now I'm going to, just try and keep up. But in Ironman, I can get onto the run and know I'm going to catch people up, which is, so it's just way better. And it just suits me more. And I think it's better for my physiology, better for my training. So, Is it your cadence? Does that? I ask because my cadence is so slow. So what I really try to focus on when I'm running parkrun, right? Yeah. Is turn your legs over quicker. Yeah. And because I'm so slow, I don't know, I can't recall what the average cadence should be, but I'm right at the bottom of where you my cadence is pretty slow. So, I mean, I work in so it'll be. Most people around 90 is optimal. I run a marathon about 85, so I am a bit less, a bit slower, maybe. I'm 67. That's ridiculously slow. It is. Yeah, I try, imagine how good I could be is what I think in my head. That's really, really slow. Yeah. So, Dan, then with regards to, obviously you're more suited to the long distance triathlon. And of course, people will know you as the age group champion in Kona and your ketogenic sort of journey in that long distance sort of sport. How did you transition from, well, I assume there was a transition to low carbohydrate for you. When did that happen and why? So it happened in 2012, and I remember it specifically because it was when I decided to take it on, I was actually in the Olympic Village in London. One McDonald's fry too many? Yeah, exactly. And you try going on a low carbohydrate diet in the Olympic Village, it's not that easy, I can tell you that much. It was all because basically Tim Noakes was talking about it, and I was talking with Prof, and I knew he was trying it. And I think I first started off with more going, I had to use the word paleo, but it was kind of more paleo kind of thing. And then gradually, just through talking with Prof and talking and reading what Tim Noakes was talking about, I gradually brought I kind of think, hang on a minute, I didn't really need to. I used to be obsessed with carbohydrates. I think I had to eat it. And then I started taking less and less, and I was fine. I was absolutely fine. It's kind of baffled me that I could still ride for 4 hours without necessarily taking anything on. But I think, this is what, one of the reasons that I built a course in this area is because I had to learn the hard way, and I went really, really low ketogenic. And then gradually over time, I think I've just kind of found a happy medium where it's generally low. You're generally low in carbohydrate with a little bit of carbohydrate periodization here and there. I think, that everyone talks about carbohydrate periodization, and I think that is the way forward. But, most people get it wrong in that they have this idea that you have periodized periods of low carbohydrate, whereas I believe that you should generally be low carbohydrate and periodized periods of higher carbohydrate. The opposite way around.
Yeah,
it
interesting.
Makes way more sense from just a satiation point of view and training perspective and everything else.
So I'm going to move into one of the questions that I got for you, which was just someone just wanted to know about your energy source that you used in the ride and the run to achieve what you did at Kona. And I know that you've done a few Vimeo videos on this and have a blog, but you used ketogenic and periodized carbs for your sort of race build-up?
I would never say I was ever ketogenic.
Yeah, okay.
No, I mean, I was in the early stages when I was trying things out. I think I did go to a ketogenic stage, but I just found I didn't need to, and I didn't find it very beneficial either. I think naturally, the reason I don't think you need to is because if you're an endurance athlete and you train first thing in the morning and you'll naturally go into ketosis anyway, exercise-induced ketosis, so you don't have to worry about it. I mean, I have so many people that say, I'll wake up in the morning and I take my ketones and they're not at 0.5, but it doesn't matter. I mean, as soon as they do some exercise, they'll be ramped right up. So, so I'm not ketogenic. But to answer that question, I do take this kind of train low, race high approach. And for the race, I was around 50 grams of carbs per hour on the bike, which was in the form of maltodextrin. And then on the run, I just took what I could really. And I remember specifically grabbing 2 gels at an aid station. So that's 50 grams, 60 grams for an entire marathon. And then I'd just take everything else that I could along the way, just through the aid stations really. But I mean, I think, if you've got a good fat metabolism and you get close to 50, 60 grams per hour and you're not really pushing yourself. I mean, I think I averaged like 260 watts for that race. And I went really like full on. I reckon I could have done a bit more. I was pretty comfortable doing that, which is why I ended up having a good run. I got off the bike quite comfortably. And I also think I got off the bike quite topped up, in terms of both hydration and carbohydrate stores.
Okay, so was that strategic? Your sort of 260, did you know that was going to be comfortable for you, or was that a surprise?
I knew that would be comfortable, but I was just kind of trying to, keep within the race sort of thing. It just kind of happened that was the way. And I knew that I was running very well coming into that race. So I knew that I could run a very fast marathon, so I wasn't really that fussed about being in front. I knew that I could get onto the run and have a good one. So, and as they say, cycle for show, run for dough. And it's like the marathon is so important. So,
you mentioned the carbs. What other fuel sources did you have? Did you take ketones?
I had some ketones in my bottle, which was
esters or salts.
It was a 1,3-butanediol, which is an ester. But it's not like the monoesters that you can get now, so it's not as potent. And whether that did anything or not, who knows?
It's interesting with ketones. I have a conversation with Brianna Stubbs about ketones. She's never been ketogenic or particularly low carb, actually. And we were talking about what the research shows with salts and esters, and I think you and I have had a discussion about their utility as a recovery tool. More. But despite that, I take on board the ketone salts before a higher intensity exercise. And I do actually notice it. And I don't, and I mean, hey, it might be the electrolytes because it has 900 milligrams of sodium. It might be the calories aren't as low as what the packet would suggest because they don't actually include ketone calories per se. Don't know.
The reason I had raced with this 1,3-butane for nearly every single race I'd done in the lead up to Kona. And I'd always had a good race, so I was not going to not take it for this race.
Yeah.
Like every race I'd ever used it, I'd always had a good race, so I was just thought, well, it's not doing me any harm, and I seem to have good performances. From it. I think with the salts, you do have to be, specifically for the longer distances, just because the sodium content's so high.
Yeah.
And it can affect the gut permeability and whatnot. So I think that's why the 1,3-butane good. I've actually been doing a bit of work with Delta G.
Yeah, I've seen them.
So they have so the human ketone, it's the same formula, but they were going like B to B because it's the Oxford formula, right, from Oxford University, but now they've launched their own, and I've been using that, and I've been really impressed. They have they have something that's called the Tactical, which is just a pure ketone. And I just have 1 teaspoon of that in my coffee in the morning, and I get a good kick.
Do you want to give me some before I go?
I've used it all.
Mate,
yeah.
Damn it. This would have been the perfect opportunity.
Yeah.
Is it actually widely available?
I think it is quite widely available, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. I have a bit of the performance. So they've got different ones. They've got a performance one, which is kind of a bit weaker, which is mixed with a blueberry flavour. They've got the health one, and then they've got the Tactical, which is a pure ketone, really strong. If you teaspoon it, you will be dry retching in the corner. It's like
the Pediatia version.
Oh, it's horrific. It's really horrific. So, but I've been... I think, so my theory with ketones is, and this is what I'm doing a bit of work with Delta G, is that I think it's the dosing's dependent on your fat metabolism.
Yeah. In that
if you have a high fat metabolism, you probably don't need as high a dose. You need a little bit less.
Yeah, interesting. Makes sense.
One of the main reasons is because it will somewhat suppress your glycolysis a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you've got, people who have a high fat metabolism, the generally glycolysis isn't quite so good. So if you take a big bolus of ketones, you can end up feeling a bit almost bonked. And I know a lot of ketogenic and high, athletes with a high fat metabolism will take like these the mono esters where ketones are getting up to 3, 4. They can feel like they're almost bonking because they just don't have the glycolysis to support it, particularly if they don't take it with carbohydrates. Yeah, interesting. So, and your advice for athletes who chase ketone numbers, and I ask this because I see it all of the time. Yeah, don't bother. yeah, good. It's interesting, right? Like even if you listen to the likes of Don D'Agostino and other people who sort of research in the field who have a real kind of knowledge around it, even like what they're saying has changed over times as well with regards to the 0.5 being that arbitrary sort of... It's such a random number. It is, isn't it? And, the thing that really drilled this home for me is we did... 12-week ketogenic study, and we looked at, and we didn't call it was very low carbohydrate diet. It was less than 50 grams per day. And diet didn't change. We monitored what they ate, we monitored their carbohydrates every day. And ketones, like the first week, they started and went up 1.5. And then over the next, periods and up to the 12 weeks, it just went down. Yeah. Because you're only measuring the rate of appearance. So, yes. So you can be measuring it, but does that mean because you're not seeing ketones in the blood after week 12, you're less ketogenic? You're eating exactly the same thing. Yeah. So you can just chase a number, and all that will happen is you'll become more and more severe in what you're doing. Yeah. You'll start because you'll go, I need to get my ketones high. You'll go lower in your carbohydrates. You'll start introducing fasting. You won't have enough food. Yeah. So it's just. It's something, it's like you're chasing your tail with it, really. Yeah. And you'll never end up if you really want to have ketones high, you'll just end up doing crazy stuff that's going to be detrimental to you. Yeah. And as I sort of understand it, like if, as you say, it's the rate of appearance, if they're not present in your bloodstream, yet your diet has remained consistent, potentially you're just using them, right, as a fuel source. Which is where, the combination of using the blood and the breath, because acetoacetate and acetone, that's a better signal of how much you're using. So you think of the blood as really what's there. Yeah. But then the acetone is really what you can be using over time. So I think, that's why typically what you will see is if you're measuring both, you'll see, breath ketones someone will start on a ketogenic diet, blood ketones will go very high, breath ketones will stay low, but over time, the blood ketones will go down, but the breath ketones will come up, which is why if you really want to get a good handle of it, you need to
do both.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah.
And as a side note, I had a client who reported that he was fastidiously doing a ketogenic diet, going very, very low, but yet getting a higher fasting glucose actually in the morning.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Once he brought his carbohydrate up, that fasting glucose went down.
Yeah. And this is and I have an athlete who was, especially in athletes, because they become so catabolic, and cortisol goes up, glucocorticoid goes up, and then they just get more high levels of inflammation, and then the blood glucose goes up. And I see it so much is that you just have to introduce a little bit of carbohydrate before bed, and the blood glucose in the morning is a lot lower.
Yeah, so, interesting. On that, what are your thoughts on fasting, Dan, for you? Well, what do you do?
I don't really do any fasting. I do. I mean, I do some. I think when I was on your podcast last week, I talked about that 800 calories per day thing. But I do times of like severe restriction just to give myself a bit of a reset. But I don't really do much fasting because I don't really think athletes, if you're training a lot, it's just a bit of a slippery slope. So I don't really recommend my athletes to do it that often.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like I'm similar. And in fact, myself, like right now, training for 100K, not 100 miles.
So disappointed.
I
expected more from you.
I know. But like there's no even so generally speaking in my normal life 12 hours, which isn't even fasting, but that's generally what it would end up being once I get up, have coffee, do my training, breakfast. It's generally been about 12 hours. Yeah. But right now, and it's not even the uptick in training through the week at all, because my training through the week is like 60 to 75 minutes a day. So it's, or maybe 45 to 75.
I thought you were going to say hours a week.
Oh, shoot, no. I've never been that athlete.
No one would have been that athlete.
Yeah. But it's the weekend training, and it's really just made me hungry. Like I just have to eat. So, and you just have to,
it's hard to keep on top of it, because especially if you're doing long sessions, you're not eating till 10, 11 o'clock, and then it's quite hard to catch that back up, right? So,
that's exactly right.
And I always say, when it comes to diet, I think the most important thing is that you have good energy balance, right?
Yeah.
That's first and foremost.
Yeah.
And as soon as you're doing things that puts that at risk, then you shouldn't be doing it anymore, right? Yeah. And that can even be the same for any diet. If you're even a ketogenic diet, a low carb diet, if that's making you so satiated because ketones are an appetite suppressor that you're not eating enough food generally, then that's not good. That's the most important thing, is that you have a highly balanced, a nutrient-dense diet, that you have enough calories to support what you're doing, right? So, and
I see people sort of talk about fasting and saying, I'm breaking my fast at 12 o'clock and whatnot. And I sort of just think it's a waste of the food that you could be eating, and I think as a nutritionist, we're all obsessive and we just grew up that way, and that's why we're in the field we're in. And I've said that many times. And reaching that balance where you can actually enjoy delicious meals more often is always going to be better than trying to restrict it down to less often.
Yeah, exactly. I think like with the fasting though, I do think it has its place in like your normal. I'm only talking for athletes, because I think if you're not. Like if, for example, I went away for a week and I couldn't do any training, I would probably introduce a bit of fasting.
Yeah.
But I know that Peter Attia, he's has a great example, is that, he has those three levers, is that you either reduce your calories, you restrict some sort of macronutrient or have some restriction, or you restrict the timings of when you eat. And you should always have one of those on go. I always choose like number 2, which is, I tend to avoid carbohydrates generally. Otherwise you're in the SAD.
Yes.
Standard,
completely.
The old SAD.
And I guess that's certainly who I was referring to, the more athlete population. Because of course, half of my clients are not athletes, and they do have metabolic issues, which does require a real focus on oftentimes it is eating window or eating frequency and things like that. Yeah. Interesting on Peter Attia. I don't know if you've seen or clocked on his Insta, but he's moved away from his previous protocol of fasting. He used to fast once a month for like 3 to 5 days, but found that in fact it's just too catabolic for him.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And
he needs to take some exogenous ketones then.
Maybe.
Because that has been shown to really help with fasting, is you take exogenous ketones.
Yeah, helps protect, prevent breakdown.
Yeah, maintains lean mass a lot.
Yeah. So he's actually shifted to a different, like still an eating window, but instead of fasting during the morning, he'll eat a lot less in the evening time. And sort of like front load it.
It's quite severe though.
It is quite severe. And it's interesting, there are the Peter Attias out there, which I love following, not because I want to emulate what they do. You just get real insight into some of the impacts that these things can have.
I mean, even when at that 800 calories a day that I did, and it was great. I actually really enjoyed it, and I felt like I really got a good boost from it. But Kate, my wife, when she did it, she was just said she was so hungry the next week all the time. But I mean, I loved it, and because I did that, and I've done the fasting mimicking diet, and I found it so much better, so much easier. My blood glucose was so much more stable and a little bit higher, whereas when I went on the fasting mimicking diet, my blood glucose was like down in the 2s.
Yeah, interesting.
But it was just I added a little bit of protein and I could train a little bit more. I wasn't as cold.
Yeah.
I mean, the fasting mimicking diet is brutal.
Yeah, I haven't done it. And, and I don't think I would get any benefit from it at this point in time in my life. What I do have, as you will know, is my Mondays Matter program. That's actually being released. Registration's open next week as we record this podcast.
You're doing, isn't it the second run?
Second run, yeah. And
what is it the Monday Matters?
It is. It's protein sparing modified fast.
Okay.
So
just for one day?
No, it's tiered. So if you have 5 kilos or less to lose, it's 1 day a week. Between 5 and 10 would be 2 days. Right, okay. And more than 10 would be 3 days.
Okay. So is it low protein?
No, high protein.
High protein.
So you only have protein on, so you don't even have vegetables on that day. It's low calorie, so it's around about 800 calories.
So it's very similar to the 800 one that I did. Yeah,
it is. But appetite is so much better regulated on that, I think, than in the sort of fasting mimicking or the 5-2. But in addition to that, you also have the diet break at the end of the fortnight. Because I think that's the key element that is missing in a lot of the programs, is allowing people to practice maintenance. Because losing weight is actually super simple, which is what the program is for. It's a fat loss program. The key and the goal is to, give people tools to help them maintain that loss over time. It's challenging. I mean, that's why there's a weight loss industry.
Yeah. And I also like, with any of that calorie restriction, severe calorie restriction stuff, there's more to it than weight loss as well, right? There's so much. I mean, one of the things that I really like about the 800 calories with a bit of protein is, if you look at it from specifically, for example, NAD boosting, you can do other things as well. Yeah. Like you can actually still do the other things that are really beneficial overall to boosting your NAD and therefore your longevity and health, because you can exercise. Yeah. You can still keep a bit of protein in there. Yeah. So I think it's, what was I going to say on that? I was going to finish off something, but I can't remember now. No, okay.
That's all right. Barry can edit that out. Yep. On that NAD boosting, did you hear David Sinclair on the latest Joe Rogan?
No.
He's an interesting guy.
I think he dyes his hair.
Actually, so there were a few key things which he did on that podcast, which just really kind of ruffled my feathers. If I had feathers, this is quite like.
It was funny because he does look young, but then there was one. I follow him on Instagram, and then there was one post he did, and I was like, mate, your hair has changed.
Okay, so one of the things which I'm like, mate, how can you claim to be responsible for your father living beyond 80 when you've just told me that your grandmother lived to 95 and smoked and drank every day? Anyway, NAD boosters sort of makes me think about supplements. Do you take any supplements?
Yeah, I do. I take nicotinamide mononucleotide.
Oh, you do take the NMN?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and I take transresveratrol as well.
Take what?
Resveratrol.
That's interesting. Is there good science behind resveratrol?
Depends on what you're looking for. In terms of like longevity of life, nope. Not, I mean, it's really hard to prove. But in terms of lowering blood glucose,
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
So there's a meta-analysis that's being done on that, and you know, the thing that I always, for the scientific truth, I always look for a meta-analysis if I really want to know something, because that's the ultimate one. And there's a very good meta-analysis that showed that it did lower blood glucose and inflammation. Well, supposedly therefore inflammation. So it's funny because my buddy who we talked about before, Art Green, he was he's been trying CGM and he started taking the resveratrol, and unbeknown, he goes, could it be possible that the resveratrol could be lowering my blood glucose? And I went, yes, it could. And, you know, so it does.
So are we talking about postprandial or just in general?
General during the day.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So generally lower and more stable.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what you've looked at in terms of the blackcurrant literature, but that also has an insulin sensitizing sort of...
Honestly, the blackcurrant stuff, it just seems to be the panacea to absolutely everything in the world, though.
I'm taking it.
The amount of things I've heard about that blackcurrant does this, it does this, it does this, it does this.
It could well be the amazing superfruit, right?
Yeah.
I take MitoQ, and I take... Not that you asked, but I'm telling you. Currans. I'm so proud of myself, actually, Dan. I've gotten into a really good habit around this.
Yeah.
And then I take post-exercise. I take that in the morning, and vitamin D. You should be on vitamin D.
I take vitamin D. I take 1,000.
Is that all?
No, 4,000.
Okay, good.
Quadruple the normal amount. Yeah.
And
that Leica, is it, what's the name of that vitamin C? Lipo.
Oh, I like lipospheric.
Yeah,
good job.
And the probiotic from Be Pure.
Oh, nice. Be Pure. You've got quite a range of things up there. It's good.
Yeah, Mikki's just looking in my pantry.
Yeah.
And the biggest tub of peanut butter you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah. I completely zoned into that, actually. Good call. I love that. And I've been I take collagen.
Yeah.
Good green stuff, Vitality. That's like a good broad spectrum multivitamin, basically.
Yeah, right, okay.
I take creatine.
I've been on the creatine.
Have you?
Yeah, well, after we talked, actually, remember we had that chat with Chelsea, and I got on it, and it's been good.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've actually just run out, and my hair hasn't fallen out, which is also positive.
I know. I was really thrilled actually.
Because apparently you can either lose hair on your head and grow hair on your face.
Oh God! Well, that has not happened to me yet.
So thankfully, we're both all right. I've still got hair on my head. You've still got hair on your head, though.
Yeah, that's another Huberman thing. I did actually get a couple of DMs in my Instagram after people had listened to that and said, Mikki, you take creatine and tell people too. Yeah. And then, but for anyone listening, examine.com is the best independent site for sort of evaluating the literature. And it is completely independent. Okay. And like everything, I subscribe. And I actually think I bought a lifetime membership.
Oh, maybe I'll check that out. Yeah, my morning routine with what I take is pretty hardcore. Like I'll get up in the morning and I'll make a coffee, and in that coffee I have collagen. And if I've got ketones, I'll put a bit of ketone in there. But if I don't have ketones, I'll put the lion's mane that you can see on
I have that.
Yeah, put the lion's mane in there. I haven't doubled down on it yet. I just think it might explode.
Yeah.
Too much cognitive focus. Imagine the lion's mane and ketone at the same time. It would be could be messy.
It could be messy.
Yeah. And then I take my supplements, which is I get some water. I put the vitamin D in there. I put the M&M in there. I put the creatine in there, so I kind of mix it into one big thing, and then I'll have the capsule forms as probiotic, magnesium glycinate,
nice,
and the transresveratrol.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's expensive business, this longevity stuff, though.
It is, right?
Out. Well, it's not cheap. The transresveratrol and the M&M is, yeah.
Surely you'd write that off as business cost, though.
I know, but you know what's worse is that it's just going to mean not only is it expensive, but you live for longer and you have to pay for it for longer. So
I know.
It's a lose-lose.
It really is. Yeah. And I guess, some people, have real noticeable benefits through taking these supplements.
Yeah.
And I the thing is, you don't know what you don't know, because I could completely remove all supplements and then see how bad I could feel.
Yeah.
And that would probably be the only way that I would know. However, despite that, the literature is there to show benefits with things like coenzyme Q10, like the currans, despite the fact that, as you say, it, currans for, why not currans for the COVID, actually? I mean, maybe that's what they have yet to sort of research. That does everything.
Yeah.
So I just have to trust that what I'm doing is actually just at the cellular level, I'm sorting myself out.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm the same. I think there's no harm in that. I mean, it's funny because you maybe reverse the clock 10 years ago. I took no supplements, and I was in fact, I actively said you don't need supplements, because it's like, if you've got a balanced diet, then don't bother. But I've completely changed my tune and also some of the things that I even take, you're not going to get through a diet anyway, right? M&M, you're not getting through diet, right? I mean, you can take myosin, foods that are high in myosin to try and boost your NAD, but it's not going to. And even the M&M, if that's really boosting your NAD, that's also a little bit, the evidence isn't strong.
But you're hedging your bets.
No, hedging my bets, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm happy. And sometimes I feel like a bit of a hypocrite as a scientist, because I know that the evidence isn't that strong for M&M, but I still take it. But at the end of the day, very likely to do no harm. Well,
and I think as well, Dan, is that you're smart enough to know that scientific inquiry is just one line of evidence.
Yeah.
And whilst this isn't necessarily related to supplement evidence per se, but I listened to Chris Kresser and he talks about lines of evidence as being the scientific trial, the meta-analysis, as long as the trials are good enough in that meta-analysis to be, gold standard. And then you've got the evolutionary biology, and then you've got the clinical experience as well. And so you'll have things that you know of from your athletes, which you might not find in a clinical trial, yet are very real and true and happening in real life.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's just how we have to. I mean, there's some things like, especially if you look at like some other things like for the longevity side, like things like metformin, I will not take that.
Okay, so that's the other thing that David Sinclair hilariously said on Joe Rogan. In one breath, he dismissed anyone who had any concerns of metformin around strength training and the kind of the blunting of hypertrophy. In one breath, next sentence, he was like, I don't take it on my weight training days. And I'm
Well, it's not just the weight training, it's the endurance training. It looks like the thing is, it looks like it doesn't mitigate any of the benefits of doing the endurance training. So, and I mean, some of me who endurance train so much, then just the thing is, like on the NR and the NM side and exercise, I see them as quite almost complementary.
Yeah.
Then if you go into like metformin and rapamycin sort of thing, I just don't think it's as complementary to everything else that I'm doing. So I just
And I mean, that's just adding hundreds of dollars a month to your regime. Don't need that.
No.
Dan, favourite meal?
My favourite meal? Ooh. So Kate, she makes this, it's like a lasagna squash thing.
Ooh.
People probably won't know what a squash is. It's that big yellow thing that you kind of scrape it out and it's kind of stringy. Yeah,
it's becoming more popular in our supermarkets.
So good. So she does that, and it's like she makes it with mince and puts some chorizo in there.
Oh, lovely.
And then some cheese on top, and it's so good.
Yeah, that sounds
And it's even better the next day.
Oh, it would be, because those flavours kind of meld in,
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, it's my favourite. But yeah, I mean, Kate's like, she makes some very tasty stuff. So I never want to go out for dinner because I don't need to. It's like
got a restaurant right here.
It's real. I mean, and she's all on the low carb. She also makes these like sometimes we do wraps, but she makes these like almond flour.
Yeah, nice.
So they're amazing. So we'll have like fish tacos and in the wraps or pulled pork.
Yeah, nice.
And the kids love it too. They really like it. Like, I mean, our kids, I wouldn't say my kids are definitely not low carb. They smash blueberries but they don't really eat any rubbish bread or, white bread and stuff like that. But they love they just eat these wraps like straight. Nice. She also makes these, just going on. Another thing is she makes these naan bread.
Oh, yeah.
Made with mozzarella.
Oh, that will be like the fathead recipe.
Oh,
yes, amazing,
they're
right?
so good.
Yeah.
So we'll have that with like she'll make like just a standard curry.
Yeah.
Like we'll have with I reckon it's a real calorie bomb though.
Oh, it would be.
Yeah, but it's so good, so tasty.
But with all your endurance training, and how old are you, Dan?
39.
Oh, mate, are you?
39 in October.
Oh, shoot, you were like 35 in my head.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's because I'm so youthful. It's all that,
it's all that NAD boosting.
It's like, so you see, who says N&M doesn't work? Yeah.
Hey, now...
And I don't dye my hair either.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. So now talk to me about CGMs, continuous glucose monitors. First of all, you have been sort of beta testing the Super Sapien app, or you were a few months ago. When is that going to be available in New Zealand and Australia? Do you know?
No, I don't know. So I'm on the scientific advisory board for Super Sapiens. I also do a little bit of work for them. But it's not. It's basically it's to do with the medical practice that getting the Abbott Libre continuous glucose monitors basically not valid or to be not part of a medical supervisory thing. So at the moment it's only available in Europe for that reason.
Okay, so it's Europe.
Yeah.
So someone had a question, how to get a CGM without the GP hitting the hypochondriac alert button under the desk. I could answer that. You do it, you get it from mediray.co.nz.
Yeah.
However, I think it does really highlight something which I saw on Twitter a few weeks ago, in that, there are people who really think that this continuous glucose monitors for people who are not diabetic are really harmful in terms of their behavior and their obsessiveness.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, Dan. What do you reckon? What I reckon is that, do you really want to wait until you are too far gone to then understand how food affects your blood sugar? Or, healthy people like us, you can actually get some real value out of it.
Because you only know what you know.
Yeah.
Right? And I can guarantee that most people who I know who have put one on, they're surprised by how high and variable their blood sugar is. Yeah. I think like you don't. Do you have to wear it all the time? Probably not. I think, but someone putting it on and having a period of time where they're actually just understanding will be really beneficial for someone to have, once a year or something, just to kind of tune in and know what's affecting you, because you just don't know.
Yeah.
So.
See, I've got a few at home actually, and I keep meaning to put one on just because.
Yeah, I've got 20 down there.
Just 20. It's a few more than me.
Yeah. I've got a few here, so.
And a few notable things that really spiked my sugar. One was a protein. I love protein bars. I love them. They're not health food at all. There's a brand called No Cow, and it is, in fact, it's probably one of the quote unquote cleanest available, but it does have isomalto.
What about
oligosaccharide
Quest protein bars? Are they pretty good?
They're not bad.
Right. Okay. Yeah. When I heard that someone was recommending them, and the person who recommended them, I was like, I don't know who it was. Maybe Dom D'Agostino might have recommended them.
It would be. He's quite a fan of the Quest.
Yeah, because if he recommends it, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, totally.
He's got to know what he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll get myself some of those.
Yeah, no, they're all right. They're from everything in there is organic.
Yeah. Cane sugar.
That's natural, isn't it?
Organic cane sugar.
No, I don't think there is actually.
Right, okay.
Although people who do like take their ketones do note that half a Quest is fine. A whole Quest pulls them out of ketosis. Same with this No Cow bar. So even though it's 1 gram of sugar or maybe 4 grams of net carb, my blood sugar spiked because of the fiber in it.
Right,
and that's something which I noticed.
So just to get into S fuels, because that needs to be discussed right now, talking about high quality bars. So the S Fuels Life Bar.
Yeah.
If you eat an S Fuels Life Bar, you can't even see it.
My mate Zach said the same thing.
You can't even, it's like your glucose is total flat.
I really want to try it with UCAN to see what the response is as well. Do you know?
I've never tried it with the UCAN. I've tried, I did try the UCAN in some porridge and give a big spike.
Oh, and was it the porridge or the UCAN?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. That's the thing. That did give. But I think also moving forward, I didn't have it. Now I soak it the night before. That might make a bit of a difference as well because I had it hot water on top, so maybe that makes a difference. But,
Okay, so I noticed some interesting things. What I want to know, and not just me, but other people were as well, how useful will these CGMs be for within training nutrition? Like, what can it tell us if I'm going out, for example, if I go out tomorrow morning to a 20K run and are able to sort of note what my blood glucose is doing through the CGM, what benefit is that to me?
There's so many benefits actually. Where to begin? So I think one of the things that people don't. Well, let's talk about the way things like blood glucose and the way things that all work. So if you exercise, say you and me, say one person exercises, right? And they exercise at 260 watts for 2 hours. The level of muscle glycogen, the rate of reduction in the muscle goes down at a continuous rate. And if you take in carbohydrate, the rate of reduction in the muscle glycogen stays the same. So taking in carbohydrates does not affect your rate of reduction in muscle glycogen, which most people don't realize.
Yeah.
The only thing it does is it affects your liver glycogen. So it tops up your liver glycogen. And the liver glycogen then goes out, and that's what's topping up your blood glucose and why you're seeing like higher levels of blood glucose is being maintained, right?
However, muscle glycogen is still continuing to disappear.
Exactly. So muscle glycogen is still continuing to disappear. So if for a very long period of time and you don't take in any food or you have a poor fat metabolism, whatever, you'll eventually muscle glycogen will come down. You'll start to deplete liver glycogen, and once liver glycogen is depleted, muscle blood glucose will start to drop as well. So with that kind of knowledge, there's a few things that you can start to understand. One is you can use it in training to understand if your fat metabolism is improving, right? Because if you think about like the rate of reduction in the muscle, the only way you're going to improve that is through increasing your fat metabolism.
Yeah.
Like taking in cut food is not going to improve the rate of reduction in the muscular level, at least. So if you go through a training intervention, and I see this all the time, is that if someone trains at the same person does 260 watts, if they improve their fat metabolism, the rate of reduction or the time it takes for blood glucose to come down will be much longer, much more extended. And that concept of durability and how well someone's going to last is much better. But also you can, during racing, you could potentially use it to time your carbohydrate based on when you're getting those reductions in. Rather than saying I'm going to take 60 grams an hour or 90 grams an hour, you could kind of take more or less depending on whether you're seeing your blood glucose moving.
Can it tell you how much you need? Or is it more?
No, I mean not say you need exactly 20 grams right now. I think you can, if you see it kind of dipping, you can think, right, I might take a little bit more right now.
So qualitatively, you feel that before you'll see it.
Yeah.
Or at least I'm trying to think of what.
Yeah, you might do. I mean, also I think it's really one of the things that happened to me the other day is I have like my Endure IQ squad sessions. We do like a Zwift squad session every Thursday. And one of my coaches couldn't take the evening session. So this is a prime example of where this blood glucose thing really comes into fruition, and you can see it, is that the morning was like it was, I think it was 30 on, 15 off, but it was like really high power. So big glycogen depletion. I went through the whole day and I just forgot about it, and I just didn't take in any carbohydrate. So I would have started then I had to do another one that evening, and I would have started that with very low liver glycogen, very low muscle glycogen, and my blood glucose
straight away.
Yeah, really low, and I felt really lightheaded. And I actually, for the first time in a very long time, I actually had to get off and take some carbs. But the reason being to me, that shows the importance of exercise timing, right? Try and do 2 hard sessions in a day and you don't think about it, because usually I just don't really do that kind of thing, but I did it because I had to. So that shows where if you're starting to see big reductions in your glucose and you want to maintain performance, then you could then take something in. But again, like, just because doing more performance or doing more watts, more speed doesn't necessarily mean you're getting more training adaptation either. So
how come?
So we just actually published a paper. So me and Jeff.
Oh,
Jeff
yeah.
Rothschild.
My mate Jeff.
Yeah, you mate Jeff. So we just published a meta-analysis that looked at AMPK activation.
Yeah.
So AMPK is basically, it's upregulated when you have during energy, when you're really deficient in energy. So you have a change in the ratio between ADP and ATP. So really high intensity stuff. And what we showed in that was the rate of AMPK activation was highly dependent on ending muscle glycogen.
Ending muscle glycogen.
Ending muscle glycogen.
Okay.
Yeah. So all things considered, so this is where it gets confusing. If the main thing is intensity, like intensity is the main thing. But if you did like 10 by 3 minutes and it was set at a set power output, like most people train, they say, okay, I'm going to do this at a set work output, and they have a program, then you will get more, at least AMPK activation through doing with a slightly lower muscle glycogen.
Okay, interesting.
So you might find it a bit harder, but you get more training adaptation.
So that would speak to, I suppose, depleting glycogen to a point where you then get on and begin that at low muscle glycogen. Yeah. And there's no way of really measuring that unless you had a biopsy, but just by virtue of training, do it. Yeah,
exactly. But it's also dependent on the type of training. So you're probably going to see more benefit from doing it, like not at that kind of mid zone, so between your VT1 or aerobic threshold and anaerobic threshold. That sort of training is when you're going to see the most benefit from doing that, because once you go a really high intensity, it doesn't matter anymore because it's just at a high intensity. You had the confounding factors of all the metabolites that are upregulated through high intensity exercise. It completely wipes out any nutrition.
Okay.
So intervention. So the only time you would do that really to get more training adaptation would be through that during that kind of tempo sort of efforts.
Yeah. And would that be something that someone would look to do in their base phase training or into key training? Like, because we often hear that, in order to help upregulate fat oxidation, fat metabolism, that's something you want to do sort of in that base phase before you go into.
I think it's more dependent on it depends on so many things. Is if you're kind of time poor, that might be a good way to do it. You get a bit more bang for your buck with your training.
Oh yeah.
But if you're training a lot already and it's all you can manage, and it's going to be harder. Yeah. So maybe don't do it. It just depends on where you're at with your training cycle and what you're capable of.
Yeah.
Like for someone like me, for example, I don't train anywhere near as much as I possibly could train. So I'm always kind of a bit underdone.
Yeah.
So for me to go out and do for example, I do 8 by 8 minutes on the trainer just around my 70.3 power. Doing that in a slightly depleted state might be a bit better for me.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Dan, I'm going to shift gears a little bit, talking about HRV, something I know next to nothing about.
I know nothing about it either.
Okay, perfect. So someone asked, and I've got a few comments in and around this question, however, but not really related to HRV, but is there a relationship between HRV, heart rate variability, and blood pressure?
Blood pressure?
Yeah.
I know there's a relationship between HRV and blood glucose.
Yes.
But is there a relationship? I would imagine that there is a relationship between people who have hypertension and lower HRV.
Yes. Okay.
It would make sense. You think about how people get high blood pressure. They either, they've got smaller veins and arterioles, right? And bioreceptors, when you they are linked to the autonomic nervous system that detect stretch. So that's why when you have a lot of blood plasma volume expansion, hypervolemia, the bioreceptors detect that stretch in the veins and arterioles, and they'll increase parasympathetic activity.
Okay.
So if you look at the other side of that,
where
someone who's got hypertension has probably got smaller veins and arterioles, then they'll have they will probably be more sympathetic because they've just not got the same amount of stretch. That's me kind of taking a bit of a physiological guess at it, but I would expect that would be the case. And I mean, HRV is a great indicator of all-cause mortality and overall health anyway.
Yeah. Of which blood pressure is also.
Exactly. So I'm sure the two would be interrelated.
Yeah. And also a lot of hypertension is related to insulin resistance.
Yeah, yeah.
Which would then, of course, bring in...
And too much salt.
And too much salt.
Stay away from the table salt, everyone. No, we're just joking when we say that.
Yeah.
Well, table salt maybe not, but you want to get but not good salt's okay.
Yeah, exactly. So the next question was, what are the best interventions to increase heart rate variability and lower blood pressure, which I feel almost like, if you're going to be increasing your HRV, even though you're talking mechanistically how they're related, though we're not necessarily 100% sure, it's going to affect your blood pressure.
So why don't I just say how to increase your HRV, and then we assume that if you increase your HRV, you might
drop your carbs to lower your blood pressure and lose weight, basically, is my advice.
Yeah, well, I mean, the losing weight thing is massive anyway, because what was I reading the other day? It was looking at eggs and cholesterol. It was a study that was looking at eggs and cholesterol.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
And basically it was like, if you eat eggs and you put on weight, your cholesterol will go up. If you eat eggs and you lose weight, your cholesterol will go down. So I mean,
or is it the eggs?
Exactly. But I think the main things when it comes to HRV, the main thing is that's been shown to have the biggest improvement is low intensity endurance exercise.
Dan, okay, so I have always been scared to look at HRV. I'm just scared mine's going to be low.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter if yours is low. I mean, people are so varied. It's all about knowing what yours is and then seeing how you can improve it over time.
So relative to
yourself. Yeah.
Okay, because you have a Whoop.
Yeah, I'm wearing a Whoop right now, yeah.
That measures your HRV?
Yeah.
What made you decide a Whoop over an Oura Ring?
Not
that you had to make that decision, I just assumed.
No, well, free, for one. Can I say that? Oura Ring didn't send me one.
Thank you, Whoop.
And then Whoop were very kind enough to send me one. And I really like the Whoop as well. With Whoop, it's really good integration between HRV and training as well, and some of the things that you can journal and see what's affecting your HRV. So I do think that's pretty good.
Cool. Yeah. So back to then, if the best way to increase your HRV is that low intensity.
Yeah. So specifically below the aerobic threshold.
Yeah.
That's the most important. So what you typically, and we published a paper that was published in the International Journal of Sports Physiology and Performance that showed that low intensity exercise will typically boost it. High intensity exercise will typically send it down.
Okay.
That's kind of obvious because if you think of what HRV is doing, it's when you increase your heart rate, you do so through a withdrawal in parasympathetic activity.
Yeah, of course.
And then when you go into high intensity exercise, you increase heart rate through activation of sympathetic activity. So you're producing your catecholamines, they're going into the system, and then that's there over time. And that's why if you do high intensity on high intensity, you'll suppress your HRV quite a lot.
However, if you use high intensity judiciously as part of your training, over time there should be a net benefit. But it's that's where the balance becomes really important. Yeah. Like blood pressure, like if you do a strength training session, your blood pressure will go up.
Yeah.
But it's not like we should never do strength training because it increases blood pressure.
And it's the same with blood glucose. If you do high intensity exercise, your blood glucose will go up. But over time, the net is beneficial. But if you did it day in, day out, continuously with no rest, eventually it's you're going to be one straw will break the camel's back, and you'll have some negative outcomes. Take note, F45ers. Oh, basically. Yeah. Although I'm not saying never say never, because the whole thing appeals to me a little bit, but no time for that right now. Okay, so another question on HRV, and I don't know many of the people who, I didn't write the names of the people for these questions, but I know this comes from my mate Viv Hazelton. She's lovely. Hi, Viv. HRV, how do they work the average of the HRV out? What do you mean? Okay, so... Average of the HRV over... So, over, yeah. So right. Baseline HRV. So they wait until you have a period of 3 to 4 days and then they average out the HRV? Then they look at depends which platform you're using. I mean, so, like, for example, HRV for training... it will, it'll get the minimal period and then give you a baseline, but then that baseline will kind of expand. And usually it's about a week of data, and then it'll, that week will be a moving kind of average. And I don't know, I'm not sure how other platforms do it, but you usually get the smallest minimal amount of baseline you can get, which is usually 2-3 days, which is pretty inaccurate still. But then over time, at least it gives you something to start with, and over time it gets more and more accurate. So,
okay. Yeah. Should I be measuring my HRV?
Yeah.
In Trick?
Yeah.
Do you use HRV in your new platform?
Yeah, we do. So Trick, so we use it every morning as a kind of a readiness score, but we don't just use HRV. And it's the same principle that what we applied before, what I talked about before, is that it learns and it will, it'll get the baseline. And then also it will, with that baseline, how you report. So every morning it'll go, okay, from what we've seen the day before, what you did the day before, we assume you're this. And then if you actually say you're different, it'll kind of learn and kind of keep on adjusting to try and get your own individualized recovery rate. But we don't just look at HRV, we look at HRV and resting heart rate, the day-to-day variation in HRV, motivation to train, muscle soreness, and mood.
Okay.
And all those factors give you one recovery score.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
the training you did the day before.
Okay. So Trick is then for a platform, like a coaching platform.
It's a training platform.
Okay.
Yeah, at the moment. I mean, I think in the future it will be good for coaches as well.
Yeah.
But it's a dynamic training platform that will set a training program and auto adjust to your availability and adaptations to the training.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. It sounds super exciting. And we haven't even really talked about what it is or why you're doing it or anything like that, which I've just realized. And we talked about it prior to coming on.
Yeah, I know. Now you're thinking, oh, yes.
Yeah, that's right. I got it. So Dan, you've been working on this for like a while now.
Yeah, a while. Yeah.
Yeah. And so who is it for athlete wise? Like, is it taking the place of a coach? Is it?
Yeah, I think it will take the place. I mean, whether it's ever going to be as good as a human coach, but I think we can get it. I mean, it's going to be more responsive generally. I think one of the...
Than a human?
Yeah, because, I mean, even everyone knows that, you can be coached by an online coach. I think it's going to be better than your average online coach. No offense, online coaches. But, the coaches who have got like 30, 40 athletes, they can't respond in time, whereas this will automatically do it very, very quickly.
Yeah, awesome.
Or just on the fly based on the session that you just did, it will change it. So it's on that continuous loop. It's like, what should I do? How did I do? What should I do next? That continuous loop of analysis.
And what athlete is it for? Just the triathlete?
At the moment, it's just triathletes. But the idea is that we will eventually get into running and cycling. And we went for triathlon first because obviously I know a little bit about triathlon, but also it's kind of the most complex. So we can turn things on and off. And so, you can just basically turn off swimming and running and have cycling. But yeah, the main thing it does is it uses your wearable data and your values to try and understand what your individual recovery rate is. And it goes for an optimal training intensity distribution of high intensity and low intensity, but it won't allow you, if it doesn't feel you're recovered enough, it won't allow you to do a high intensity session. Swap it for an endurance type session, and trying to always meet your availability and your hourly, how many training hours you want to do a week and things like that. So yeah.
Sounds pretty exciting. Is this are you excited by it?
Yeah, very excited. I think it's going to be big time.
Yeah.
It's going to be the next big thing. I'm hoping. And also people have so much data and it doesn't do anything. And at least now it's actually going into making informed training decisions, which most people just sit and look at that. Any HRV, people don't know how to actually interpret them and put it into your training. And this will actually do it for you. It will change your training based on what the actual wearables is saying and the training you did the day before. So if you did a massive training day and you went, you're supposed to do 2 hours and you went out and did 5 with your mates, it will sort it out for you. So
that's awesome. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm not such a data driven person, and for exactly that reason. Like, I might be able to collect all this data. What will I do with it? And I don't have the time to sort of figure that out myself. And I don't have a coach. So, usually it's just something that Baz and I talk about. Oh yeah, what about pace and stuff like that.
I haven't done a high intensity in a few days. I might just that sort of thing.
Basically, yeah. But also there is something to that sort of, that intuition, that sort of rate of perceived exertion and stuff. I quite like thinking about, okay, how am I feeling today as well? Have a plan, but also take note of how I'm feeling.
Yeah, like during the session.
Yeah. Interesting.
Alrighty team, so before we jump on and finish off this conversation with Dan Plews, I wanted to give you an opportunity to win some protein powder, which I'm pretty excited about because it is from one of my favourite brands, which is based in New Zealand. It's Balance Sports Nutrition, and it has no artificial colours, no artificial sweeteners, flavours, and no preservatives. So it's a super awesome product. They do 100% whey, they do 100% whey protein isolate, which is generally really good for people who may not tolerate a casein protein, which may promote gut-related issues or inflammatory pathways in the body. They're usually pretty safe actually on a whey protein isolate. And also though, for those plant-based athletes, they do a really awesome plant protein powder, and their plant protein powder comes with additional branched chain amino acids, glutamine and digestive enzymes to help support that digestive process. Now, all of their protein powders have a super high protein ratio of, you're going to get at least 21 grams of protein within each serve, and low carbs between 1.7 and 2.4 grams, and low fat, which you would expect from a decent protein powder. And that's pretty much it. And they come in a delicious range of flavors as well. So in front of me right now, I've got cookies and cream 100% whey. I make my nice cream with this at night, which I absolutely love, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, head to my Instagram highlights. And also I've got the salted caramel, and that's a plant-based protein one, and this is your opportunity to win either your choice of 100% whey or the plant protein powder from Balance. And what I need you to do is hit my Instagram story, and I'll pop a little box up there for you to answer your question in, and this will be on the Wednesday when you listen to it, but I'll save it to allow those of you who may listen to this later on in the week to also have that opportunity to answer this question. What is Dan's favourite food? Now, he's mentioned a few of them, a few different meals, so if you can remember what he said, pop it down in the box on Instagram, and we will choose randomly. We'll use one of those little computer generated varieties to send your choice of either whey or plant protein, and we'll choose a couple of people, obviously, so we've got more than just one to give away. And hey, you got nothing to lose, right? Because how awesome is it that you get free protein powder? Now, this is at the minute only open for New Zealand based listeners, I am sorry, but regardless of where you are, please enjoy the rest of my conversation with Dan Plews. Totally is. So before we get on to these last final questions, Dan, how's lockdown going for you?
Yes. Do you know what? I don't really mind lockdown too much. I'm kind of not that sociable best of times. It's not. I actually really don't mind it too much. I think it affects. It's harder for. It's definitely harder for my wife than it is for me, because I have to keep working and she doesn't, we don't have the help with the kids. I think that's the main problem. So, it is a bit disruptive because I can't work as much because I'll try and give her a break as much as I can. But I actually don't mind it too much. And the main thing that bugs me is not being able to ride, go out cycling and do a decent amount of cycling. That kind of is a bit of a bug. But no, it's going all right. Surviving.
That's awesome.
I'm just fortunate that work doesn't really change that way,
Yeah.
But, I don't really get. I feel for the people out there where the business is really affected, and I'm just fortunate and thankful that doesn't really affect me too much.
Yeah. Here we are. I think it's really easy to sort of just go a little bit into your own head and into your own situation and sort of go a bit woe is me. And it's interesting this time around with lockdown, like I feel a bit differently about it than what I did the first 4 times we were locked down, but equally know that at least we're not in Melbourne where they're continuing to be locked down indefinitely because, I don't know, Delta's running rampant or whatever. So pretty lucky in that respect, I suppose.
And I think there's a few riots over there as well, with people like rebelling against the lockdowns as well now. So, you got to be grateful for what you have. All the time, really.
Basically, yeah. And so, not able to get out cycling, but you're doing some good training inside.
Yeah, I mean, I can get out. I get out and I'll run outside still, and can't swim, but I have my Vasa trainer, which is pretty good. And then and I mean, I'll go and I will if the weather's good. I have been riding out within the restrictions, but yeah, it's all good. I mean, it's that mental clarity. As long as I can get to do my bit of training today, still getting my sauna and my cold water immersion done, which has been good. Because that's at home, so pretty fortunate for that. Count my lucky stars for that one.
Oh, look, I've been thinking about that actually, because that's the one thing I haven't had access to over this time is the sauna. And I was thinking about all the people I know who have saunas at their house, and of course you're one of them. Although quite lucky, we've got a little tidal beach just down the road from us where it's entirely safe to dip your toes in. So I've been doing that. I haven't been doing that. I did that once actually, and now that spring is here, I think psychologically it's going to be easier to do that, all safely and legally, of course.
Of course, yes.
Yes. So Dan, what I'm going to do is get to these last few questions. The first of which, one moment, cool. I just had them up actually. Okay. First one, Dan, how are you going with Super Sapiens? Are you still measuring your glucose at the moment?
Not right now. I'm just showing you the back of my arm. You can see I've got the little mark where it's been. But I actually took one off. I took it off like 2 days ago because it ran out. But I have been using it quite religiously. Yeah, I haven't used it. I'm still part of that and still using it. So.
Yeah. Did you see Alex Hutchinson's sort of review on continuous glucose monitors for sport performance that he published on Outside Online?
No, I didn't see it. But I think someone forwarded me the review of it today, actually. But I haven't opened that. Someone sent me it. Was it positive, negative?
It was probably just a little bit of. It's a little early to say how useful this is going to be for performance. I think. They talked a little bit about some case studies, some on the elite athletes and how it didn't, who was it? Kipchoge's used one and is using one, and yet his data is remaining sort of top secret as they're sort of working through how they're going to utilize it to help improve his performance. And I suspect that, that'll come out in time. But they talked about this other British runner who I believe he just broke the I'm going to say under 23 half marathon record in the UK. I may be wrong about that, but he used one to see whether it was that knowledge would help improve his performance. But unfortunately, he had carved up so much before the race because in a previous race he had dipped below with his blood glucose levels. So I thought, right, I'll give this a go to see whether if I know what my glucose levels are at, can I optimize them to help avoid that from happening in the race. But he ended up chowing down on so much carb before his race, which I'm not saying is a bad thing because he went out and then smashed that record, that his blood sugars were off the chart, and really that CGM data wasn't even able to be used. So, which I thought was sort of interesting. Right. So it was, you'd probably read it and then come away from it thinking, well, that was an interesting read, but you don't really learn a lot from it.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think there's so many things to be had from it. I think, Super Sapiens, they're looking at it from very much a performance perspective, but I'm thinking it's going to have more applications for general overall health, of course, but that's not sports related. But then I also think it'll have big implications for substrate use and figuring out if you're if you're shifting your substrate from more of a fat-based fuel to a carbohydrate-based fuel, because if you have good fat oxidation, what most people don't realize is that the muscle glycogen depletion, if you're taking in carbohydrates, it doesn't actually change. So your muscle glycogen depletion rate is the same regardless of when you're taking in carbohydrates or not. The carbohydrates that you take in is only having effects at a liver level. So if you're exercising specifically around the top of your level 2, so just below the aerobic threshold, it's kind of at that level where, there's not a lot of sympathetic drive. There's not a lot of carbohydrate burn. So you'll get pretty fast depletions in your blood glucose. But if you get a better fat burner, you should be able to remain stable for longer. It should be quite flat. But if you're quite a lot of poor fat burner, what happens is your muscle glycogen depletion rate will be higher, because that's what we know, and that will definitely change. But as a result, it's only a matter of time before your liver glycogen starts to come down. And once your liver glycogen is down, then you'll get depletions in your blood glucose. But if you've got good fat oxidations, that whole process is a little bit slower. And I think that has big implications to athlete durability specifically. That's something that we're looking into a lot in our lab at the moment, is this concept of athlete durability, is how, why, there's one thing that you can measure someone's threshold, be it the aerobic threshold, but how long can they maintain that for, and how does that change over time? So one of the studies that we've got going on at the moment is basically you do a lactate test, which was like, it's a step test that takes you just over your aerobic threshold, 2 hours at just below your VT1, and then another lactate test, and we see how that lactate test changes after you do a long period of exercise. And it's been really interesting because you can get two athletes. Like I had me, for example, mine didn't change at all. Like, I'm quite doing Ironman. I'm quite durable. Obviously, having good fat oxidation, and my lactate levels was exactly the same pre-post. But you get someone else, and that 2 hours is at the exact same relative exercise intensity, and literally they can't even finish the second lactate test. And I think that is largely to do with substrate use. A lot of it will be due to substrate use. We're not sure why at the moment, because we're kind of just in that acute phase, but I think it's to do with substrate use. And I do believe that in those athletes who have poor durability, you will see significant reductions in blood glucose over that 2 hours. So I think that's where it'll have its use more than anything, really.
Yeah, interesting. So in that longer duration, well, first of all, the type of athlete. So if you're a better fat burner, then it may be less. You'll be able to see that because you'll get that much more steady glucose. It will be less likely to decline as quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah, but then I suppose over a long duration race or training, just a less of a decline or a slower decline.
Yeah, but it depends on the intensity. So if you're doing, it depends how much fat you're using as a fuel. So at a very, very low intensity, you could almost be 100% fat, using fat as a fuel. So you could be quite stable for 4 or 5 hours, even if you're low enough intensity, you've got good fat oxidation. So the intensity is critical when you're considering what you're actually expecting to see. And in fact, we're just launching a course, LDT 104, our athlete monitoring course, and one of the module 10 is all around CGM, and I get into the details of how you can use it to look at substrate use and also recovery, because specific spikes in blood glucose at rest can really be linked to inflammation or recovery, specifically in athletes after rest days. So typically what you can see is that if you have an athlete who typically they wake up in the morning and they have let's talk in milligrams per deciliter, and they're at 80 milligrams per deciliter in the morning fasted. But then after a rest day, when they've not done any training, they are, 190. That's a good sign that they're probably a little bit overcooked, or they're dependent on, they have some kind of insulin resistance or underlying issue, because they're so dependent on exercise to stabilize their blood glucose. Because one thing that exercise does is you have insulin-free glucose uptake, so you don't really need insulin to take to utilize the glucose and put it into the muscle. But also, one thing that I didn't realize, and after doing some research, is that interleukin 6, so IL-6, it's both pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory. So during exercise, IL-6, interleukin-6, is one of the main things that actually uptakes and reduces blood glucose. So that's another reason as well. So if you're exercising a lot, you get these two methods that are really great at stabilizing or removing and giving you good blood glucose levels. But if you don't exercise and suddenly they spike, it's a good sign that maybe you could do with a bit of rest or need some recovery.
And what is it that is accounting for the raised blood glucose if it's not as a result of just the fact that exercise will lower your glucose, so you wake up with a lower glucose level? So what's going on there? Why would my blood glucose be higher after a rest day?
Yeah. It's the training that you've done before it, I think, is the main reason, because if you're doing a lot of specifically high intensity, you're not recovering from that exercise and you have a lot of sympathetic activation.
Yes.
There was a paper that was published that actually specifically showed that glucose tolerance, so they did this specific period of overload training, and it showed that mitochondrial respiration was poor, and it showed that mitochondrial function was lowered. And one of the other things that it showed was glucose tolerance was also worse. And it was all linked to the exercise, specifically doing this overload period that was very linked to high intensity exercise. So if you're seeing those sorts of things, it can be a sign that maybe you've got your training intensity distribution wrong, you're not sleeping well enough, you're a bit sympathetically activated. And, this could tie in also quite nicely with what you would see in things like heart rate variability and sort of things like that, because the two are so interlinked. There's a great review, and I can't remember the name of the author, but there's a review on that whole cascade of the endocrine system and hyperglycemia and the stress response. I'll try and find it for you.
Cool. Because often, people just assume that as endurance athletes, we spend so much time utilizing that glucose that we're going to be, that our blood sugar control and our glucose tolerance is actually going to be, it should be favorable as opposed to having any issues with it. But you do hear, though, more and more of those athletes that might go to their doctor and actually present with almost pre-diabetic, I don't like pre-diabetes as a term, but with that higher blood sugar level that might look like you're actually more of a sedentary type person with metabolic issues and not the fit person you thought you were.
And honestly, I see it all the time. Like the amount of athletes who are just cruising around all day with, they wake up in the morning and they're like 90 to 100 and they're cruising around the rest of the day in the 110 to 120s. And I see it all the time, and it's not even that uncommon. Yeah. Honestly, it's like, in fact, it's almost 50-50.
Mate.
With the athletes that I work with, but, and the swings that they get, it's not surprising at all, because if you don't pay attention to it and you have that mentality, it's like, I'm an athlete, it doesn't matter. Particularly if you're an age group or you're an older athlete, that's what's going to happen for sure. It's definitely what's going to happen. So
yeah, and Dan, from a diet perspective, those people much more so than say your metabolically healthy young athlete is going to benefit from reducing down that carbohydrate load and actually having a much more appropriate, I don't know, and looking at strategies to help improve the fat oxidation, basically, I would think.
Yeah, and I think it's twofold. There's one is the diet side, and also the other side is the training intensity distribution, the balance. Because if you do too much high intensity, it is becoming more and more clear. Specifically, that anaerobic work, it doesn't do you any favors in terms of your mitochondrial function. It has benefits. It has benefits from a performance perspective, of course, because there's many other things that go on. But I don't really think there's actually that much need from a health perspective to do real super anaerobic intervals, like your 30 seconds on with, like 6 minutes off, that kind of thing. I just don't think there's that much need. I think there's, for like VO2 max based intervals where it's, maybe 30 on, 30 off or something like that. I don't think those real purely anaerobic ones, I just don't think there's that much benefit in doing them from an overall health perspective personally.
I was chatting to someone on my online platform, and they'd just completed a couple of days ago 7 hours on the trainer, 3 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon, some kind of like competition they were doing. And I think, unfortunately, like lockdown is for some people, it makes them really demotivated and they don't really want to do anything. But for people sort of in our community, I think almost the opposite is true. It's like, well, I can't go out there and smash myself. I've got nothing better to do, so I'm going to smash myself for like almost the entire day, right? That kind of thing can't be very good overall for your recovery and your metrics either, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think like doing that type of thing is probably better than just smashing yourself with a load of high intensity every day. One of the other things that people do during lockdown is continuous back-to-back Zwift races.
Oh, yes.
I think it's better to do a lot of, that sort of thing's really gonna pay, but you're gonna pay the price for doing that kind of thing. That's for sure.
So, do we know when Super Sapiens is going to be available in New Zealand and Australia?
No, sorry, I don't have. I'm not that high up on the food chain. I don't know that information.
Okay. You could probably you should send a sneaky email to your mates at Super Sapiens just to ask them.
Yeah, I could, but I don't know. But I don't know the answer right now. Sorry.
Right. Thank you, Dan. And okay. So, what are your thoughts on using DFA Alpha 1.75 to locate first aerobic threshold and a 0.5 value to estimate lactate threshold 2 via HRV? Now, before you answer that question, I will just kind of preface it by saying that was almost like a different language to me. So if you could explain as you're answering the question, what it actually means for those of us who might not have an appreciation, that'll be amazing.
Yeah, but you don't ever know the answer yet.
I just assumed that you would.
Yeah, exactly. So DFA 1 alpha method, it uses HRV to try and ascertain aerobic and anaerobic thresholds. With the idea as heart rate increases, you increase heart rate firstly by parasympathetic withdrawal, and then past the first aerobic threshold, heart rate increases through sympathetic activation. So what the DFA A1 alpha method uses, it looks at the correlation between HRV and the change in heart rate. So because the parasympathetic system is much faster to respond, the correlation between what the HRV is and the change in heart rate is stronger. And as you become more sympathetically mediated, the correlation becomes less because the sympathetic system is much slower to respond. So what it says then is that as soon as you go past a correlation of HRV and the change in heart rate at 0.75, that's supposedly the aerobic threshold. And then the next stage, when it's less correlated to 0.5, that's the anaerobic threshold. And that's what the DFA A1 alpha method uses. And the really cool thing about it is that it can be done in real time. So you can literally look at fit files and kind of look at, where in some terms of someone's heart rate, it's around 0.75 or 0.5. And that's quite new. I mean, HRV to actually expose aerobic and anaerobic thresholds has been used a lot, and it's used like high frequency, like spectral analysis, different components of HRV. But this is kind of DFA 1 alpha method's got a lot of attention recently because of some good publications in the literature, specifically around the aerobic threshold, because we can test kind of the anaerobic threshold a little bit through like your FTP test and looking at what you're sustaining for 40 minutes to an hour, what the average heart rate is of maximal exertion. So you can get that, but we have really no measure of the aerobic threshold without going to the lab. And from a training perspective, it's critical. We really want to know that, especially when we're looking at like a pyramidal polarized training intensity distribution, because we want to know where we should be doing our low intensity training, what heart rate should we be doing that. But anyway, long story short is that at 0.75, the literature is quite clear that it's a really good way to test it, and it's a really accurate and valid measure. Marco Altini, who owns HRV for Training, he built a HRV logger app that you can actually download, and it will go and do that thing. It will actually measure the DFA 0.75 for you. And I tested it in the lab. So I went in, in the lab, tested it against some metabolic data using the metabolic cart, and the difference was 1 beat. So 1 beat in heart rate. So it's pretty close from N of 1, but other studies have also validated that. But then 0.5, looking at the anaerobic threshold, because the intensity gets higher and there's more movement, it tends to be a little more noisy. and I don't think it's as accurate at 0.5 as it is at 0.75. So I don't know I would look at using some other measure, like more of a performance based measure for your anaerobic threshold, and use the DFA 1 alpha method at 0.75 for the aerobic threshold. Then you've got your two, because they're the two things you need for your training zone, to decipher training zones anyway. You want to know where your aerobic threshold is, you want to know where your anaerobic threshold is.
Okay. So if someone, so you say there's the Altina app that someone can download and that can sort of work that stuff out for you if you don't have the opportunity to get to a lab to work out your lactate threshold. Did I get that right?
Yeah, so Marco Altini is the creator, but his app is called the HRV Logger.
HRV Logger app. Awesome.
Yeah, that's the name of the app.
Yeah.
HRV Logger.
Yeah.
Yes, but Marco is the creator of HRV for training. So he created the HRV for training app, and now he's also created the HRV Logger app as well, which you can use to get your DFA and aerobic threshold.
Yeah, nice. So if you download that app and you've got a heart rate monitor, so I remember we spoke about this actually the last time we were together, and I said, well, if you know your heart rate, you can work this out. And I'm like, well, I don't have a strap, but I've got a watch. And you're like, no, you need a strap for it to be accurate.
Yeah, you need a strap, yeah. Because you're dealing with HRV, like, you think about what that means, you're looking at the gap between heartbeats. So if you have if you're using it from your wrist, or even not a very good heart rate strap that has a good recording rate, it's not going to work, because you miss a beat, it's going to be all over the place. So you definitely need it from a heart rate strap, and my recommendation would be a Polar H10. They seem to be the best in terms of the ones that you can use, because the recording rate and the sampling rate's a little bit higher.
Oh, interesting.
So you get more accurate data with that. I tried it with my Wahoo and I got terrible data. Tried it with a H10 and I got good data.
Yeah.
So.
And does that H10, does it just sort of connect to other Polar watches of any sort of type, or is it a watch and strap together?
It's only a strap. You can buy the strap on its own.
Yeah.
And it's Bluetooth and ANT Plus compatible, so it'll connect with your Garmin. It'll connect with Zwift. It'll connect with the Logger. It's a good strap.
That's amazing, because so many companies are like, no, you're only gonna this is only gonna connect to something that we make, and we're not gonna allow you to sort of cross pollinate.
Well, for a long time, Polar were like that, but they've seen the light, and now the Polar H10 will connect with anything. So it's quite handy.
That is handy. To me, that just makes so much sense. It means that so many more people will kind of jump on and buy something like that, rather than have to be sort of stuck at having to either buy an entire system that they don't need, so they won't even bother, or look at other alternatives.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you do get it for the just to analyze your DFA 1 alpha, you've still got it to use for the rest of the time anyway. So win-win.
Awesome. Win-win. Hey, Dan, one final question. Could glucose monitoring in HRV be used in tandem to provide non-lab, non-invasive physiological parameters?
Well, I read this question before, and I was like, non-physiological parameters to measure what is the question? It's quite. I don't really know the answer to that, because obviously it can measure a lot of things, and it is measuring a lot of things.
I wonder whether
I was going to say the two together, I think, will provide a very good health metric, metabolic health score, because the two things that we know are very linked to all-cause mortality and longevity are low and stable blood glucose. Well, not low, within range, so we're talking millimoles between 4 and 5. And then also a higher HRV. So the two numbers together can be a really good score for, also I think, for recovery as well. So, they could be in tandem, they are a great score. And I'm working with a company actually at the moment where we're looking at developing a ratio between the two to give you kind of a metabolic health score. So I do think, it is something that can be used in tandem. And I think in the future there will be something out there that does that. But, the question of physiological parameters, it's like what physiological parameters it's measuring. blood glucose, which can be linked to inflammation, for example. It's measuring HRV that can be linked to stress. But is it going to measure your VO2 max? No. Is it going to measure your thresholds? No. But it's doing other things. So it depends what you want to measure,
and in fact,
what you're interested in.
It did come back to as I was reading the question and just sort of thinking about it. Of course, we were just talking moments ago about that blood sugar response using CGMs and having high fasting blood sugar in the morning could be linked to poor HRV as a sign of as yet another data point showing that you're not that well recovered. So, I guess probably, more and more people are jumping on board the data thing and trying to think of which ones are available that are going to help probably suit what they're interested in and the metrics that they're interested in. It's great that we've just got so many out there now to sort of to use, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's all easy. The good thing about it now is that you have all these great, the Oura Ring and Whoop and all this. It takes out a lot of you having to actually measure and do it yourself because it's just continuous, and I think that's quite nice.
Yeah, agree. Now, just a couple of final little questions, Dan. Obviously, we've already spoken about your favourite foods and the supplements that you take and things like that. Tell me, what podcasts do you listen to?
I've just started listening to the Huberman Lab. Actually, that's the first time I've listened to it. It was. I have to say. It's good on some things, but I think he gets out of his lane a little bit on the other things, I have to say.
We spoke about that, and that'll come up earlier in the podcast.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, since we last spoke, I've listened to a couple of some really good things, so I did enjoy it. I listened to one recently on fat loss that was on the scientific basis of fat loss, using different things. And I enjoyed some parts of that, sure. But yeah, so I started listening to that. One that I always listen to religiously is a Greg Bennett podcast. Greg Bennett? He's got a really good podcast. He interviews a lot of interesting people. He's also had Tommy Wood on. Anything with Tommy Wood on, I'll always listen to that. I really find him quite insightful. And Tim Ferriss is a regular. Peter Attia is a regular. The Drive. I listen to The Drive when they have some good episodes now and again. Not The Drive, sorry. Peter Attia is The Drive. STEM Talk is what I was thinking of. I said Drive, but I was thinking STEM Talk. Yes. STEM Talk is quite good as well. Yeah. And then also the Physical Performance Show with Brad Beer. You know that one? That's a good one.
Yep.
And this really good one I know called Mikkipedia. I don't know if you've heard of that one. That's quite a good one.
Do you know what, Dan? No wonder we're both on the same page because you've just basically mentioned most of the podcasts that I listen to. So I feel legitimately smart, actually, because Dr. Dan Plews also gets his information.
Yeah, but we know that you only listen to the things that I listen to. You just copy me. So.
Do you know what? That may not be true on that front, but I certainly bring your name up every time I mention the freezer and the sauna. And just to round this up, because I know that Barry is editing this podcast, I will say that surely a fifth lockdown is reason enough to have a look at getting something like that in my house. But anyway.
Yeah, it's the way forward. It is pretty good. I reckon, and that, the Huberman Lab podcast, and he talks about cold as as a way of fat loss and inducing the shiver.
Yes.
I reckon I've definitely leaned up a bit. I was talking to Gordon Walker this morning actually, and because I seem to have really be going well in my training at them. I don't know what the reason is, because I'm not like I'm even training that much, and the only thing I can put it down to is sauna and cold water bath. Who knows? So many things.
Do you know, interesting, Dan, because I've been going super well in training too, actually, and really recovering well. And up to sort of a few weeks ago, pre-lockdown, I'd also been doing sauna 3 times a week for at least 20 minutes, in addition to the cold showers and getting in and doing a dip once a week, which is not nearly as much as what I would have liked. So I think that has contributed, but also I do wonder how much these currents, I've been taking 2 of these each morning for the last 6 months at least. And I really think that that's making a difference to my recovery on the basis of both the research, but actually more just the other anecdotal stuff I hear from other athletes that take them. So I'm quite convinced because I did 40K on a Saturday. I did a harder 20K on Thursday, did 40K on Saturday, did 17K on Sunday. I did not feel smashed up the way that I would have this time last year.
Obviously, you're talking about cycling there because no one's going to be running that kind of distance.
Obviously, I'm talking about running because you know what I'm like on a bike.
That's crazy. That's more. Even when I was training for Kona, I don't think I ran over like 100K per week, maybe once or twice.
Yeah.
But another thing that I have been doing, and I've been super strict with for probably about 6-7 months now, is strength training. So that who knows, that could be something as well. So I've been doing that twice a week. And that, I think that's made, I'm so much stronger. It's crazy how much stronger I am.
I'm super pleased, Dan, because so many athletes in your position, like very good world-class age groupers, just do the endurance stuff and then stop actually competing for a period of time, because I know that, you've got plans to come back in some way, shape or form, and then don't even bother with the strength stuff, but continue just to cycle, swim and run to the detriment, basically. Like you just end up getting slower and weaker.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Like, I don't know, I think I've got a 16, maybe it's a 16, a 20 and a 24 kg kettlebell. When I first started, I could not lift the 24 over my head, so I could do a clean and a press up of my head. And now I can lift the 24 over my head like it's not even hard. And also like plyometrics, doing the box jumps. I started with the plyometrics on I could barely get onto the lowest box, but now I'm on the highest box, and I can do it continuously for a minute, and it's not even hard. It's like, I'm actually now looking for a bigger box, so it's like, so it's incredible that, and maybe that those some things. But just finishing off as well on the black currant, something that I got sent today is pomegranate juice. Have you heard about that? Yeah,
I have actually. In relation to sort of men's health, interestingly, what have you got?
Well, this was for mitochondrial health. Generating energy and cellular health.
Oh,
I'll send you the link.
That.
I'll send you the link and you can take a look.
Totally, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, and it's interesting.
Potentially, before we end this lockdown, which we've got 1 and a bit weeks at level 4 to go, you should do a Tim Ferriss workout, Dan. Just 20 minutes of kettlebell swings.
Oh yeah, that'll make you sore. I don't know. I saw Art Green the other day. He did like 30 minutes of like burpees, like just continuous. Well, it did like a burpee without the jump. Like, you're mad. You're absolutely
that is actually madness.
Not for me.
No. Anyway, Dan. So thank you.
Pleasure. No, thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure, and we're going to get this one out pretty quickly after the next one, so it'll be nice and up to date and current. So obviously people can find you at Enduro IQ and at where else? Yeah, so Enduro IQ is the website where we've got like online education courses that we talked around, and we're just about to release LDT 104, which is all around athlete monitoring. So I think there's so many, there's all the things that we discussed today. There's a HRV, 10 modules. There's HRV section, there's a continuous glucose section, there's a lactate section, there's loads of different exciting pieces. We've got some great guest lecturers, Dr. Dan Green from Czech Frito professional cycling team, Dr. Will O'Connor, who's a bit of a running and power guru, Ben Scott from EIS swimming physiologist, and Dr. Ed Maunder, who is the physiologist from the lab in Auckland and knows a lot around the area of substrate use, specifically with lactate. So we're pretty excited to be launching that very shortly. So we've got the courses, and then we've got our training squad and coaching and one-on-one stuff, so you can check that out. And then also I'm pretty active on the socials. Instagram mainly at the Plews one, so you can follow me up on there. We drop some pretty cool and funky videos, so if you like a good video, you can watch
check out the Instagram.
I 100% back that up. I love your content on Instagram. It's always inspirational. Even if I just look at it and go, mate, I would never do that in a swim session. But, the video makes me feel like I should at least, give it a bash because it's great quality. Dan, lovely to talk.
Yeah.
And go and enjoy your lunch.
Yeah, it is lunchtime. I'm pretty hungry. Cool, thank you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
All right, team, that was Dr. Dan. It was the second time in the podcast, actually, because he came on earlier on in the year and had a chat with Cliff and myself. So always really good to catch up with him and to see what's new in his world. And I'm sure that will not be the last that we hear of him on Mikkipedia. He's got a lot going on with his Enduro IQ, with his LDT courses coming together, and they've just released LDT 104, which looks super awesome, looking at all of the data collection sort of piece to it with endurance sports. And also, of course, he's got his TriQ training platform just about up and running as well. But that's this week. Next week, super excited to bring to you the chat that I had with Dr. Karen Fasander, clinical psychologist, on this whole idea of languishing, COVID, and how things impact on our mental health and what we can do about it. And we talk about her work. Until then, though, you can catch me over on Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, Instagram and Twitter at Mikki Williden, where I share a lot of the research that I'm looking at, and also, of course, just my usual day-to-day. And you will also check in on Instagram for that competition that we're running with Balanced Sports Nutrition products, or head over to my website, mikkiwilliden.com, and you can sign up to one of my fat loss plans, my keto longevity plan, or just a meal plan, just to sort of sort out what you're doing week to week. I am, as I'm sure you know, an advocate of a lower carb, moderate protein, high taste type approach, using sort of real ingredients just to provide you with delicious meals week to week. So you get the meal plan, you get the shopping list, you get my weekly email, and you get the chance to connect to me one-on-one through our online platform to individualize some nutrition related things that you might have any questions on. If you like the podcast, please subscribe. It would mean a lot. That's awesome. Share it with your mates, obviously, and look forward to catching up next week. All right, team, have a great week.